The treadmill's force field penetrates into the hull of the ship, forming a bond with it, and Sonic drags it into the rocket ship and presses a button to open the door. Tails runs on the treadmill, and Sonic tells him to keep going until he shouts "stop" and flips himself over the edge of the treadmill, and his feet make contact with the edge of the airlock door. He tugs the treadmill, and it slides effortlessly into the airlock, weightlessly somehow. He tells him to stop running and presses the door close button and turns off the treadmill's force field. Sonic guesses that the emeralds, or the controls for dropping them, are on the bridge, because it's the most important part of the ship. How do they expect to make the emeralds recreate the universe in exactly how they want if they didn't cut the emeralds and put any sort of device in them? I guess that's it. So he must have put nanobots in them. He starts wasting precious time after that before they started exploring. The ship becomes silent and he kicks the door open and Arctur turns to face them. Wouldn't it have been funny if the door flew into him? Somehow, Sonic and Tails stand there doing nothing to let him taunt them when the entire universe is at stake. Screw politeness. I hate that they're talking to each other instead. Why does the writer think we want to read this instead of seeing Sonic just spin jump them all at once, like would be in character? Instead, it's just like a generic action hero in a lame kids' series. I seriously don't care about the bad guy's boring speech. He talks way too much. He wants to get rid of the fourth dimension. Sonic stupidly confirms that they're not gonna kill them because they're apparently not that sort of heroes. Why did they think you would ever follow his order of stepping away from the instruments? This is reminding me of Nicole telling a Technomage villain to leave. Arctur says that he fired the emeralds at the Prime Particle 2 minutes ago, and somehow Tails believes that there's no way to time travel a second time to get to this point earlier. Did they just walk all the way here? Sonic runs away and Tails despairs, but is scared by Arctur's henchmen into following him. They get to the treadmill and reactivate its force field and start running forwards. Sonic tells Tails it's not over yet and explains that if they stay ahead of the gassy thing that just passed them, they can get back to their time and do something to stop it. That's stupid. They've already lost. The writer wrote himself into a corner by being convoluted instead of simply having Sonic beat up the bad guys in time, which the fastest thing alive would have done. There's boring, worthless recap about the fact that the wave of chaos, if allowed, would get rid of every trace of civilization, and about what the heroes are doing. Why would they get rid of every trace of civilization instead of just making sure that hedgehogs and foxes didn't exist? Predictably, Sonic decides to undo what he did for the world. Because if Arctur tried to invade during the old timeline of Mobius, Eggman would be able to destroy him with his machines. But the writer's forgetting that half the reason he did that was to prevent Eggman from time traveling to change the past, so that he rules the world and makes most of Sonic's friends stop existing. So what's his other plan to prevent that if he's confirmed that he's an incompetent hero? I hate that it takes forever boringly describing what they see around them instead of just cutting to them being back in their own time. I hate that the story insists on actually describing the process of undoing what he did, when we already know how it's going to be done, and it's such a waste of time. And it's just doing what SCC goes on to do later, robbing it of the novelty value and making it just worthless. I hate it other than that. Sonic shouts stop, and the earlier Sonic and Tails in mid-jump try to turn in the air but fall. And as before, the earlier Tails falls into the Sonic who is standing near Kintobor, causing the rotten egg to be sent upwards, causing Sonic to jump after the egg, and so does the other Sonic, because he somehow didn't get convinced being told that the fate of the universe depends on this. The narration takes forever describing all of this. The rotten egg bounces off the arm of the second Sonic back into the air, and the real Sonic catches it on one of his battered shoes, and flicks it up and grabs it, which is a little cool, and throws it towards Kintobor, who catches it conveniently. The second Sonic lands on the green button and Kintobor's turned into Eggman. That was 2 paragraphs, and somehow the narrator made it take forever. It felt like I was experiencing that in slow motion. Surprisingly, one of the Sonics who had landed on the control desk also turns evil, and arbitrarily gets changed colors so that what had been blue was white, and the white parts were blue. and his shoes and gloves were a vivid green, even though Kentobor didn't wear red or yellow anywhere, so it wasn't operating on a color inversion logic with Eggman. The Emeralds just did this to Sonic because they felt like it. But it's convenient to have Sinnoh's look distinguished from Sonic, so whatever. It's just as arbitrary as Sonic being born with super speed and not everyone else. Since the second Sonic is just the past version of the real Sonic, it made me wonder why the real Sonic didn't get this fate too. Won't Eggman be half as evil in this timeline because all of the evil of the world was shared between him and Sinnoh? I guess it makes sense that we don't notice a difference because half as evil as Eggman is still insanely evil. Sinnoh knew to call himself the Anti-Sonic because he's faced with a past version of himself, while Eggman didn't call himself the Anti-Kentobor because he wasn't. Sonic grabs the arm of the original Sonic, warning him not to hit Sinnoh because then the two of them will merge into one. And they don't know if that one would be evil too. The evil fused chaos energy wouldn't just magically disappear for no reason, so it would be evil. I have to assume the reason Sinnoh didn't attack after he said don't was because he was curious out of sadism about what exactly he was going to say and wondered if it'd be something flattering him. So Tails gets to make a plan that only the Sonics will deal with Robotnik. And Tails was able to hold the Sonic still with his tails in this very book. So logically two Tails would be even more successful at that. The other Sonic runs towards Eggman, who runs out of the room. And because it's out of the room, the writer no longer has to deal with writing this. At least with the Emerald Energy origin, I could wonder if Eggman can run faster than Sonic thanks to that. But if we are just going realistically, the Sonics would catch up to him instantly and one would knock him over and the other would stand on his back. And I guess since Sonic has super strength in these books, it'd apply here too, so one would get a wagon, and then both would lift up and put Eggman on the wagon, and then they'd knock him out. Then they'd pull the wagon to jail and say that Eggman tried to kill them so he'd be locked up. Eggman would have no chance whatsoever of getting away. Tails dodges Sinnoh's spin jump and picks up a ring and tells the other Tails to grab the rings. He jumps to avoid Sinnoh's and the other Tails jumps onto a cabinet to rescue a ring that had landed there. Tails says they need at least 4 rings. From the passageway comes a hum, and Eggmobile speeds out of it and stops for a moment in the middle of the room, and a net goes out of a trapdoor in its bottom, dropping over the 6 emeralds. Why did the Sonics let him outrun them enough that he got here? Again, I have to resort to the same assumption as in the games. Sonic let Eggman outrun him so he could entertain him some more. In this context, it looks like Sonic really wanted to stop Eggman from getting away this time. That's why it has to have been on a subconscious level. He already learned from this book that he's bored out of his mind without getting adventures from Eggman. Also, part of his excuse for making sure he turns into Eggman is that the kinds of machines he'd end up making would ruin Arctur's day. So why would he even think that he wants to stop him from getting away when that'd keep him from making those? Well, it must be force of habit, so he forgot why he turned him evil for a minute. As for why the past Sonic isn't trying hard enough to catch him, he was just Kentobor a second ago, so he would be subconsciously holding himself back from ramming into his former friend on principle, since running into someone at Sonic speed logically would kill him. I wish it was explained why the Eggmobile has a net in it. He literally just turned into Eggman. What purpose would that serve to Kentobor? Was he fishing with it? Tails dodges again and trips Sinnoh and jumps onto his back to hold him on the floor. He'd have to be careful not to land on the spikes on his back for that to work out. He tells the past Tails to put the rings over his arms and legs because they're apparently chaos proof, so they may help to neutralize the energy. I have to assume the reason he knows this is because he lives on Mobius, and so it's common knowledge. If mere rings could neutralize the power of Chaos Emeralds, then why did they think they needed to get the Grey Emeralds for that? For only a second, Sinnoh turns back to normal. So he was accidentally right. This is a really interesting mess. Tails says they need another source of anti-chaos energy, which is apparently a thing now. The current Sonic jumps into Sinnoh on purpose because he feels like he's as anti-chaos as you can get, and this place is getting crowded. It feels gutsy that it was the current Sonic. Eventually, this works just like intended. Just to make sure it's really him, Tails asks who the ruler of Mobius is and gets told that it doesn't have one, and called a divot. That somehow convinced him that he hasn't turned evil. He should have asked when his birthday was. The rings fall off his arms and legs, and he says now he can destroy them all, and then says he's only joking. Now wasn't the time for a prank like that. He wouldn't do that. It would have made just as much sense if the absence of the rings in him really did make him go back to being evil. It's not like the rings disappeared because they absorbed the evil. He should have hid himself to make them scatter and vanish. He says they saved the universe from the Mythos creatures, which should have properly explained to the past Sonic what just went down here, but instead he's confused. At least he called them super cool. Then they get threatened with arrest by the Time Police, and Sonic calls him Captain Carl so he recognizes him. It's convenient that he recognizes him instead of this being the past version of Carl. It's just as weird that the brunette still knew Sonic even though he was arrested thousands of years before she should have been born. What are the chances that it's always the present version of the Time Cops? Uncharacteristically, Carl believes Sonic about saving the universe and says good work. But since he thinks he failed his main mission, even though Eggman hasn't made a time machine yet, he thinks they should go with him because Elder J will know what to do. She didn't last time. Sonic's trusted to make a plan again when it failed last time. He says they know that Eggman got one of the Time Cops' time machines, and they know he invented a way to cross dimensions. So he bets he used that machine, and just happened to find the time machine. So he wants all of them to be there when he tries to take it. Carl tells them not to do anything that would change history, so don't kill him or capture him. Sonic notices lying beside one of the workbenches the time machine that the other Sonic and Tails used to get here. He recognizes the dents on its surface. He refuses to give Carl it because he has to make sure he trips over it in the past or that's altering history. He already altered history. Eggman and the original Sonic experienced something different when Eggman turned evil. It's already not the same timeline anymore, so there's no point in putting it there. It might not even be the same universe anymore. The narration even points out that he doesn't know where exactly it was the last time. He probably would have put it in the wrong place anyways. Eventually, they all start using the treadmill time machine. Even the Time Police run on it, even though the speed Sonic would be making it go would be impossible for him to keep up with. So the writer establishes the same lore that Heroes did, that a speed type simply running near someone makes anyone able to run through a loop. One of the Time Police falls off the back when it finally stops. Apparently an extra Time Cop showed up to help them off screen. Carl tells them the Time Cops had to pull back their forces from the research and development levels because of the war. They can't get reinforcements because most of the fourth dimension is unoccupied. They get to a room they had been to twice, and this time it's got no sign of battle damage to the walls or doors. The time treadmill breaks, and fortunately it's explained why this only happens now. The extra weight did it. Carl says they're gonna have to compensate it anyways. Sonic tells everyone to get out of sight for maximum surprise factor, I guess, and reveals that when he gets a prickling in his spines, it means something weird's about to happen. But that magic sense of his was never referenced before, and never will again. It doesn't need to be a prickling in his spines. He already knows that Eggman's gonna come here. They hide behind shelving units and items of furniture and shelves. A large circle of green light appears and the center gets static in it. The Eggmobile goes into the room, and Sonic taunts him instead of doing what he'd normally do. Just because Carl's against history being altered and puts no critical thought into it. Heaven forbid they break his Eggmobile here, even though that'd be a good thing. It still falls under their authority to arrest anyone who tries to steal a time machine. Why don't they plan on capturing him in the present? Sonic pretends to be the president of the 4th dimension in a stiff, proper voice. Tails gestures to the other Sonic to show himself. Eggman sees 2 Sonics. He wonders if everyone in this dimension looks like Sonic. The 2 Tails show up as well, and Eggman freaks out about the idea of an entire dimension full of blue hedgehogs and orange foxes. So he decides to go home, planning to smash his dimension crosser because he's panicked enough to assume it only gets him to places like this. I wasn't expecting comedy at his expense. At least this is a creative way of resolving this. So it's actually good. It would have been boring if his Eggmobile was just jumped into and that was all. And then being sent into the portal would cause him to just go right back here with even worse weapons ready to fight. But it would have felt better if it was Tails instead. Sure, Tails hadn't tricked anyone in the games either, but it would have been Tails using his brain. And we go, cool, he's actually using a skill that he's known for. The 2 Tails feel like celebrating, so they high-five and fuse together into one. Sonic thanks the past Sonic for his help. Somehow it's been an education to him meeting him. And he warns him to watch out for buzz bombers. One of Carl's soldiers takes him by the arm and they warp away to his own time. So there are multiple of them. Since Sonic undid the thing that made Eggman send him into the 4th dimension, he wonders why they're here and gets told the unnecessary hand wave that there's no paradoxes here because there's a special error trapping routine programmed into the design of the 4th dimension. He talks as if it's cyberspace, like it's a simulation, but we were never told that before. We thought it was magic. Hours later, a squad of soldiers in black armor advances into an area and get caught off guard when every doorway along the length of the corridor bursts open and hordes of time cops in silver uniforms point stun guns at them. Sonic tells them to drop their weapons over the megaphone. Some of the Mythos Creature Army had more primitive weapons, like soldiers and cudgels, instead of them all having guns. I guess they had a budget problem. Sonic tells Arthur he wants to negotiate a peace deal, and to get led by the surrounding time cops to the Science Council. Why doesn't Arthur wonder why Sonic knows he's got a big spacecraft? I guess he assumes he time traveled to find it out. Sonic asks why the 2 are fighting and gets reminded the Mythos creatures are seen as people that shouldn't exist because they're fictional. Tails whispers that never stopped Tails for some reason. Was that supposed to be a meta joke? Because that sucked. The Mythos creature's existence encourages others to flaunt the laws of science, as if everyone has innate magical power. Arthur tells his suit to release him, and under his uniform he shows huge wings, and says he doesn't ask to be a being of magic, and his kind existed peacefully for many years until they attacked them, so the writer was aware of this. He doesn't author filibuster that the laws of science can't explain beauty or art or emotions, even though they do. Not physics outright, but neuroscience is all about explaining that chemicals in the brain and body are why we feel the way we do. And why does the author think the guy who tried to remake the universe and destroy the Earth should be his mouthpiece? Arthur says that until they know everything, they can't truly say what should exist. So when they tried to kill all of the magical beings, that's why they took up weapons technology. Somehow the audience is quietly impressed by the words of someone they're bigoted against. It's annoying and awkward that Sonic says the word dude a whole bunch of times at a time like this. He says they're at the center of an infinite dimension with billions of floors, but only 10,000 people are here. Either it's population control or a bunch of immigration out of the place. And it's a dimension with no paradoxes. So if the place breaks their own laws, the laws aren't solid, and they've got plenty of spare space. And a time police force who have never caught a single criminal somehow, while the Mythos posse fights really well, so they could learn some lessons from them. Sonic says everything above a floor in a neutral zone should be organizer territory, and what's below it should be Mythos creature territory, and they should join forces. So obviously none of the Mythos creatures have houses in a place that isn't their territory, because otherwise they would refuse to move, and so this wouldn't work out. Elder K doesn't find the argument convincing because bigotry, so it really was realistic because they needed a better excuse than that. He tells Captain Carl to tell them what'll happen in a month if they don't. He says he's come back from a month into the future where the Mythos creatures are going to win the war and try to use their time travel technology to alter history to defeat them for good. So Elder J eventually asks Arctur if they could work together, and he says he's thinking it over and wants to contemplate in peace. And the writer makes her admit that he's impressive because he's stately and proud. She says that's up to the council, and so the story wastes a bunch of time on boring words until they all vote for peace. So does Arctur, and there's a bunch of applause. Elder J hugs Sonic and kisses him on the cheek and shakes hands with Arctur. Sonic hopefully lightly punches Tails on the shoulder. I don't like that. Shakes Carl's hand and the various hands of the magical soldiers. Then he shakes hands with Arctur. It cuts to Green Hill Zone where Tails tells Sonic a nice speech and the small one-time use time machine in his hand automatically crumbles to dust. I like that Tails hoped it was biodegradable. He says he got Gray to program the time machine to leave them here just before they left in the first place so that they can check that everything goes okay and fuse with them. Even though that would prevent their past selves from going on to accomplish what they went on to do and cause a paradox. Why wouldn't they just die from this? This is such a stupid concept. I'd rather the story have not wasted time on Sonic explaining what he was gonna do first. They go to Sonic when he was holding a Game Gear at the start. Sonic says they're them back in time from the future and calls him Buddy and offers a handshake. Somehow the younger Sonic is gullible enough to do that instead of assuming they were robot infiltrators made by Eggman. The past Sonic didn't trust the current Sonic on sight, so why does this guy? It could have just as easily been written that Sonic and Tails tackled them after they said no. Sonic's shoes had been repaired earlier by the scientists who put in automatic odor removers and a self-cleaning system. Sonic challenges Tails to a race to the picnic and trips over something sticking out of the ground. Why did he make sure that would happen to him again? Tails trips over Sonic's outstretched legs and falls into the water with a splash, and Sonic finds out he tripped on the mossy time machine. Sally says that if Sonic challenged Tails to a race, then they should both do the washing up. Why didn't that happen last time? Sonic's so glad that Eggman didn't get to alter history by getting rid of the picnic that he says he's cool with washing up. Sonic throws the time machine into the lake and somehow doesn't get told off for littering by nature lovers and expected to retrieve it, which would require him to bury it with a shovel. Instead, he ends the story by saying, "Let's eat." He should have just spin dashed into the ground and buried it that way. This book by James Wallace, according to Wikipedia, was terrible at pacing, mainly when it comes to its overly descriptive and repetitive narration. But it was an interesting story, but mainly just in a vacuum, because it was barely unique because most of its major ideas went on to be done in Sonic CD and AOSCH, and especially Sonic the Comic. But they were the first time they were experienced in Sonic. They just weren't as impressive to me because I had already read them, so it had nothing to offer. So it's not actually good if you're a Sonic fan. And only a Sonic fan would read this book. Really, the only thing unique about it was the war between the prototype Zone Comps who are racist against magical creatures, but conveniently don't recognize Sonic and Tails as them somehow. Even when Sonic and Tails were badnik bouncing and stuff in front of Agent Orange and Gray, they still didn't freak out at them. I feel like that could have been removed from the story with nothing lost. Eggman has a brilliant plan where he alters the past for the worse like Sonic CD and wants to get rid of Sonic's ancestors like an AOSCH. And at first he has lifelike robots from SAT-EM send Sonic and Tails through his portals to another dimension, the No Zone, before it was thought up. And like in the Flynn era, it's got a constant war with incompetent cops who are against anyone traveling the wrong way on one side. Him getting thrown into a portal in the first place is like Other M. The OCAs of this are mostly annoying. The Time Police arbitrarily think everyone who time travels is evil and arrest Sonic and Tails for it, and arbitrarily believe that the Mythos creatures shouldn't exist and don't deserve to get to live in another dimension. So it's frustrating that it isn't instantly explained that they're evil. Sonic doesn't instantly call them out on it. Of course, the Mythos creatures wouldn't want to stay in a dimension that's nothing but corridors. There's an annoying part where they have to get arrested because the writer pointlessly had destroyed their dimensional warper by giving them the idiot bomb. They could have easily been taken to a fourth dimension that's back in time from the last time they went there. Then they prevent Eggman from being turned evil and stay back in time for a month. I love that. But since it wasn't the end of the story, anyone would be able to predict what basically happens next from a mile away. It's especially annoying because the bigger threat was just made up for this book. So it's not representing what it'd be like in SDC. If it was Wendy Witchcart or the leader of the Grand Cuckoo Army, that would have been better. The evil plan was so generic it would have fit. Sonic doesn't simply go back in time a little further and shoot the bad guys with the guns he had. It makes him a selfish wuss instead. The emeralds get stolen by bad guys from earlier, who arbitrarily decided to time travel to a month after where Sonic went to, instead of going to Mobius in the present day. But they could have had the same story happen if there was a time skip of years instead.